Okay, everyone, so we'll make a start. So as I'm sure all of you are aware, the sports capital grant applications are now open and they will remain open until the 12th of February at 5 p.m. We at Basketball Ireland want to give our clubs the best opportunity to be successful in applying for funding, and that is why we have organised this webinar with 2 into 3. This webinar will deal with the capital application. We've already completed an equipment grant application webinar, which you can find on the Basketball Ireland YouTube channel. So to introduce who we've got, we have 2 into 3 who are a management consultancy who work with mission-driven not-for-profit charities and supporting bodies across the island of Ireland in the areas of consultancy, recruitment and research. Since 2006, they've developed fundraising strategies for organisations like Irish Sailing, Enable Ireland, Sensational Kids, Task, while also developing strategic plans for organisations like Lochder, Jack Terman, Irish Advocacy Network and many more. Since 2014, 2 and 3 have helped secure over 1.3 million in sports capital funding for clubs across GAA, soccer, hockey, cricket, rugby and basketball. So today we are joined by Darren McMahon and Trish. So Trish is going to lead the presentation, so I'll hand over to you now.
Hi, good evening everybody. Great there. Thank you, Paul. You've covered a few of my first presentation slides, so great. We'll try not to keep you too long tonight because we want this to be as useful as possible and we want this to be as interactive as possible so that we can actually help you with your applications and any queries that you may have with your applications. You're having myself tonight, Patricia Keenan, I'm known as Trish. I lead the Northern Ireland and Border Counties practice in 2 into 3. We are based across all of Ireland, have an office in Belfast, Dublin and in Cork. And I also take over the sports capital portfolio alongside Darren. So tonight, that's who we are. We're here to answer any questions that you have with regards to applying for the sports capital grant. As you know, it's open at the moment and you now have 5 weeks and 2 days left to prepare an application. So it's really like, what do you need? What we all know what we'd want, but what do you need and how we can justify that? How long is the application process going to take? How does the application process come together and how do you fill in the application form? What documentation you need? Really what information you need to include? What are the common pitfalls? What is also the checklist? This is where people do fall down, and it's crazy as some applications have been rejected purely because the wrong name has been on the top of a certain form and a certain appendices. So those are the type of things that you need to watch out for. And again, at the end, we'll do Q&A. Paul is going to keep an eye on the Q&A box there on the Zoom. So if you have any questions, just let us know. And I don't mind getting interrupted as we're going through it. And I will try and answer it, or Darren. Darren has been on the Sports Capital Programme for the last 3 or 4 years, whereas my accent will give it away. I've been more focused on Northern projects. So sometimes the logistics and the legalities can be a wee bit different. Like Paul said, 2 into 3, we work for not-for-profit organisations, in particular recreation sport. We've worked with a number of organisations in the past and clubs, badminton, hockey, with yourselves in basketball. We've already, I think Darren led the last webinar with yourselves. In particular small clubs. I would have worked with an awful lot in the north as well, Glentoran Football Club, hockey, all sorts. So there's quite a broad range of clubs. Now, the capital programme. This is the main programme that the government has in place at this moment in time to help sports clubs develop their recreational facilities. And don't forget, this is all about promoting participation in sport. So have that always at the core of your application. This is about promoting participation in sport, and it's for non-personal sports equipment. So it's something that the club can use within different members, users, visitors, all sorts of those sort of things. So it's non-personal sports equipment. I know this has been addressed before. And then also the capital on your actual grounds and your premises. It's open to sports clubs, voluntary and community groups, governing bodies, local authorities, colleges, education training boards and schools. And there does tend to be a collaboration with some of these people and some of these organizations to do a shared facilities application. So that is always an option, but we'll go into the technicalities of doing that. So the first things first, have you registered on the Oscar homepage? Every club has to register. Now, you don't have to register at the start of February, but you need to, realistically, you should do it now. So at the end of this session, if you are intending on putting an application in and you haven't registered, do so. And it's a pretty simple. You will put down your organization name, the address, and things like that. The only thing you may have to go and look for is your tax registration number. And that is to prove that you are not for profit, that you're not a private sports facility, a gym or whatever, and that you are a charity. So you will need that. So your tax reference number is the only thing that's needed for the registration. Be careful as well. The club that you register is to be also the name on your bank.
Sure, it's just to jump on there 1 second. We had a couple of questions the last time when we touched on this, was if they're supplying and getting a tax registration number, the taxman isn't coming after the club anytime soon. That seemed to be a big fear with the clubs. Is that true?
Yes, this is purely to check that you are not a private gym or a private sports facility. That is all this is for. And of course, you know, the taxman can always look at any organization. I am going to make no comment whatsoever on that. And club accounts is club accounts. But this is purely to prove your status so that you're not a private gym. Okay. We will just slide on past that. So once you get onto the dashboard, you will see to apply for your grant. This is what you need to do to apply for your grant. You will also see if you have received grants before. And this is going to be one of the questions that you have to answer as part of this. So if you have received a capital grant, should it be for fencing or irrigation or lighting or anything like that, camera equipment, CCTV, whatever, in the last 10 years, you can't reapply. So you need to make sure that that's what you have applied for. And I know with every sports club, personnel changes, and there can be a high turnover in some clubs, other turnover, there'll be the same treasurer there for many years. And, you know, there's a legacy of people always being involved. But just in case, you need to make sure that you're not applying for the same thing. You can't reapply for the same item of capital or for the same type of works within 10 years. Okay, so that is what that is really key for, and that's why we're saying you need to do this now, because you will be preparing what you're going to be planning for. So this is why you need to know if it's eligible or not. You will also see about the different application forms you need, all of that. This is all downloaded from your dashboard. So it's key that clubs get registered. If you're not already registered, do it immediately. Okay. Sports Capital Program in the past, basketball has been successful. It has received 307,000, not high amount of money in comparison to the big sports of Gaelic and multi-sport soccer, rugby, things like that, but pretty decent. And it's something to show that there is a legacy of applications there, and it is something that you can go for. It's just a matter of maybe fine-tuning your applications and being more focused on what you're applying for. So learn from the past. Also, back to the dashboard, I would just refer to any previous applications before that you weren't successful. Have a look at why you weren't successful, because that could be there, and then you can learn from those mistakes to turn that negative into a positive for you for this application as well. Okay, so sorry, my screen's jumping about here on me. So you can see there were the top applications. Sorry.
So just explain that. So what you saw on the last slide there, guys, was combined. So as we covered in the last section, sports capital will be split into two different tranches: equipment only and capital. So the last one you've seen there, the 52 million, was all combined. And what you can see here then is the 37 million that was allocated last time around for capital only. So basketball clubs have been successful to an extent here, but we are behind some of the other sports. So the issue for basketball clubs in particular is that we're not seeing many applications coming in. So typically of the population, the basketball population, we're getting about 10 to 15% of all clubs applying for capital. So that's a bit of a gap. If you're to compare it to the likes of the GA are always top of the list, as you can see there, but they're getting about 700 to 800 applications per round, which is about 50% of their population. So that is why they're sweeping up. Similar with golf, say, for example, as well. Historically, golf would have been lower down in that list, but last time around they got about 144 different applications across the country. Basketball, we were in the kind of 20s, or even just one or two below that as well. So part of the session before Christmas and the session tonight is to encourage you now to kind of say, okay, you know, there is opportunity here for you with Sports Capital, but we need to see greater numbers of basketball clubs apply.
Thanks. Okay, so let's look at success rate in terms of the application. So you've got the fact that basketball applied for 671,000 and received 307,000. So it's a return on 46%. Just by saying you're going to apply for 200,000 for a project, or well, sorry, it wouldn't be 200,000, but if you're going to apply for a project of up to 150,000 if you own the grounds, you can't just say, well, that's what our project is, that's what we'll get. You will not always get what you ask for. So the national average of getting what you ask for is about 36%, and that's over all sports. Basketball did quite well. There was 46% success rate, so it's not too bad, but it can be better. You can see other clubs there that have done much, much better. Other ones at 53, and even canoeing, for such a niche sport, has got 73% success. So it can be done in terms of the amount of groups that are going to apply and what you will be successful in drawing down for your capital application. So it needs to be focused, your application.
Trish, just quickly, we had a question in there for yourself and Darren. So in 2016, a club applied for 12k for floor covering and refurb of the showers, but they only received 2k as they had reached their max of 25,000. They used the 2k for equipment with the agreement of the department, and this time they may go for the same items as the max is now 50, and they were just wondering, is that okay?
As long as it's not the items that they actually purchased or received funding for the last time. So if they can show that they've never received funding for these items, that's fine.
Okay, so if they used that 2k for basketballs last time and they're trying to get more basketballs this time, they wouldn't be able to do that. But if it's something different, if it's basketball nets, they would be able to.
Yeah,
Darren,
so if they've gotten 2k for the floor covering, they can't apply for the same floor covering again. As well as that, then yes, the max is 50k nowadays, but it's an accumulative 50k over the last 4 years, and we'll talk about title and all that later. But that means then for Louise that if it is a new capital project you're thinking of, the max you can still get now is 25k. It's an accumulative 50k over the last 4 rounds.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, but you cannot apply for the items that you've already received funding for. So if you've used that 2k towards your flooring, as you say, or something like that, you can't reapply for it. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. So again, we have the amount of funding that's available, and there is never the success rate, and it does tend to be eaten up by the bigger clubs, by the Gaelic and things like that, for over 150k. So it really does depend on title, and this is something we will draw upon later on what grants were received. You'll see most of the applications were the 50k, which is equipment, and that tend to be the big one for the 2018. You've also got an issue of per capita. So allocation is by per capita. So Dublin and Leinster does receive more funding, and more of the sports capital pot will be directed towards Dublin and Leinster. So if you have a less amount of clubs applying in Dublin or Leinster, especially Dublin, then they are going to typically be more successful than in another province or in another county where there isn't as many. And you can see that there of what is the allocation per head per capita. So there's quite a disparity between the two in terms of the 2018. €7 a head was more or less given out for the Dublin region, whereas the rest of Ireland, excluding Leinster, was 12, nearly €13. So you can see if you're a Dublin club, you are going to have more chance of success because the funding is allocated on a per capita basis. So that is something to be very aware of if you're a Dublin-based club, as well as Leinster. And it's also something to be aware of if you're outside of the rest of Ireland, because you are going to have more competition for that funding and what the pot is available in that area. So you need to have a very, very strong application. So it's in Dublin, it can go to your benefit, and the rest of all the other counties, it can go against you. So it's something to be very aware of in 2018. And this is something they're not going to change, because they need to be allocating the funding per capita, per head of the population. It's just a reality, and that's the way they're going to do it. It's something maybe as Basketball Ireland can, try and lobby on, and the different governing bodies can lobby on, but realistically for this round, this is how it's going to be, and this is the reality of the application process. Okay, so figuring out what you need and what you want to apply for, this is key. So if you have capital and you actually own your premises, okay, then, or you have a lease or title with a lease of over 15 years, you can apply up to 150,000 for a capital project. Now that needs to be a legally binding lease for over 15 years from this date, from 2021. So that needs to be legally binding, or to actually own the property. This will have to be checked upon, and it'll have to be verified through legal documents, and there's appendices that have to be completed to make sure that this is verified. Realistically, they're not going to give money for a club to put in new flooring, rings, nets, everything, even changing facilities, and in 5 years they are put out and another landlord is giving it to another club to benefit from. This is to benefit Basketball Ireland clubs. So they want to make sure that your participants and your members are going to actually get the benefit of this funding, especially with the whole key element of this program being participation in sport. So they have to guarantee that. So again, it's one of those things, it's a given. So unless you own it, if you own it, you're fine. You will show that, you'll show proof of ownership of the property. If you don't own it, you need to show you have title to that property for over 15 years. So that will bring you up to 2036, if my maths is correct. If you do not have any capital, or you do not have a lease for that time period, it's up to a maximum of 50,000. You're going back to what Darren just said there. If you've already received 25, then you've 25 left. So it's over a cumulative total. And we went through before the equipment, 30,000. And if it's a regional application, which I don't think anybody here it's applicable to that. So the capital, if you own the property, it's 150. If not, it's 50, and that is key. And again, it has to be legally proven. Okay, so what it funds?
Just to jump on there, we just had a quick question. So would a lease include a long-term partnership, is one of the questions we had there.
If it's, Darren, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll jump in here again. So yeah, so if you are jointly applying with a school or a different body like that, the main applicant will always be the landowner. So to take, for example, if it is an application that's in partnership with a school, and what I'll do is I'll give you an example of one I worked on a few years ago with the Red O Hockey Club in Dublin. So the actual main applicant there, guys, was the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, or also known as the Loreto Order, which was a lease then with the school, because the school operated on that land, and the minimum duration of that lease was 15 years or more at the time of the application. And then the hockey club was in license with both the school and the landowner, the Loreto Order. So to kind of say, come back then to John, or to the question of is a lease a license agreement? No, they're different things. If you are part of a license agreement, then the landowner has to apply, and all of those parties have to be registered on OSCAR before the deadline. So you're not part of a main application, you're part of a joint application, and the people pressing the submit button are the landowners. So it's a bit complicated, and we can talk through more questions about that if people have them, because everyone's situation is unique.
Thank you.
And it's one of those things, you can't just say, well, we have an agreement and this agreement has always worked. This has to be proven, and it will have to be filled in. Should it be a solicitors, whatever has to filled in, and the landowner. And I think also, I don't know if Darren just mentioned there, the funding will always go to the owner. So it will. So I don't know if he mentioned that there, and I will just say that. So what it does fund, it will fund the likes of LED lighting. It will, for the likes of basketball, it would fund courts, flooring, nets, I don't think fencing, that sort of thing. Use all sort of indoor. It will also look at dressing rooms, changing facilities, gyms, things like that for training. So the key is participation in sport. If this is also adapting your premises for special needs, so anybody with any special needs who wants to come in and play, so should it be any sort of the different wheelchair basketball, I don't know, any of those types of games. It could be more inclusive for small children, get them involved in the sport, things like that, parents, community activities. So it's making your capital, your facilities more accessible, and therefore increasing participation in the sport.
Just I know there's a couple of clubs on the call who are looking at doing kind of outdoor courts and stuff like that as well. So maybe just to touch on the fencing and things like that outdoors, that it covers as well.
Yeah, it covers fencing, it covers floodlights, it would cover CCTV. It will cover any sort of drainage facilities that you require for that, hardcore, all of that. It will do your nets, it will do your posts. Fencing will be key, I say, for if it was going to be an outdoor facility. So there is lots that can be funded. What cannot be funded is the likes of viewing stands, spectator stands, anything like that. Anywhere you want to put people to watch, that won't be covered. Play equipment, that will not be covered. It will not cover the likes of car parks, access roads, pathways even up to the court or anything like that there. It will allow you for disabled access and things like that. You could put an argument in, but it will not just cover general facilities around your site. Okay, so always remember, if you're wondering yourself, would that be or would that not be available, be applicable, is it going to increase your participation in your sport? So a playground or somewhere to keep people entertained is not going to increase your participation. A lot of people would argue that a car park will, because the more people that can get there, the more people that can park, the more people that will take part. They draw a line. There has to be a participation in sport element to all of this. So it doesn't sort of be so lineage or anything like that there. Parking bays. Okay. So going about putting the application together. I see a couple of questions. Or is there any of them they want to stop for?
Yeah, well, this might be a good time just to get you jump through them. So one of them was if it's a parish hall with no other users, I'm assuming in terms of licensing and leasing and things like that, who would apply in that case?
Well, if it's a parish hall, you have to have the agreement of the owner of the parish, which will be the parish. So it'll have to be the parish is giving you use of that. They will have to sign off. The payment will be made to the parish for any work that you do.
The diocese could technically apply by themselves, but then you need to note that if you don't have a license agreement with them, you have no rights. And that the parish or that the diocese can make whatever changes they want to the application. So it comes down to what your relationship is with them after that.
Okay, and then the other one there is just going back to one of the drawings that you showed us. So out of the 7 successful clubs that received the 150, the max, is it possible to see their applications and if there's any idea where in the country they were based?
Yeah, it's all publicly accessible information. So yeah, the majority of them will be Dublin based. I think last time around, even of the capital applications, there were around 31 capital allocations over the value of 100k, and all of them bar one were within Dublin. And the other one, just for coincidentally sake, Paul, was in Donegal. So I don't know why it was, but that's the way it was.
We dream big up there, so we do.
Yeah. Well, I'll come back to that piece later because that isn't just a departmental decision, and I'll talk about that a bit later on.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so putting an application together. That one there. Okay. So putting an application together. There are 6 key grading criteria, each of which has a score. Now, this is where I keep going back to likelihood of increasing participation or improving performance. So it's increasing your participation. Is it community outreach? It's getting different non-traditional players in. It's showcasing basketball as a sport. I know basketball would be a very popular sport, but it's getting more and more and maybe rivaling the more mainstream. It's also increasing in performance. So if it's bringing your local clubs up to more elite levels, things like that. So these are key when you're writing your 800 characters. So you'll have 800 characters to tell the story of your club and how this whole project, and it seems very, very little on this. This is why you need to be very, very careful on how you frame these words. What work you're going to do on this capital project. What fencing, flooring, lighting, nets, but whatever you're going to do, how is that going to increase the participation in basketball in your area or improve the performance of those that are already playing? That is key to your whole project. You also should be very clear there on telling the story of your club, telling the story of other initiatives that you're involved in. And this could maybe draw into sharing of facilities. If you're within the parish hall, what other groups that you would maybe encourage to take part? What other basketball clubs you may even share your facilities with. So it doesn't, schools. So who do you share with? Do you share? If you don't, that's just something you're going to be clear with. If you do, then tell the story of that. Now you then go on to your level of socioeconomic disadvantage in your area. This is given. You cannot make any changes to this. And this comes from the Pobble Deprivation Index. And Darren would have went through this quite a lot in the last round, where you just check it with your address, whatever score you get, that is going to then probably influence what own funding you're going to put into this project. So if you have a deprivation index of 12, then you could possibly say, well, we're going to go for the 13 points, so we're only going to put in 15%, 20%. Whereas if you've got a deprivation index of 5, then you're going to have to put in 40%. So it's one of those things that you're going to have to really look at. And don't quote me on those numbers because I'm trying to remember the table in my head of what they are. So they're very close to it. But I'm just saying your level of funding is going to be possibly influenced by your socioeconomic disadvantage, and you can't change that. The technical merits of the project, that's right down to what you're going to do, what the capital project is, how much of an impact it's going to be, getting your quotations for it, getting any sort of planning. Planning is another big issue. If you have not applied for your planning, I would say at this stage you're highly unlikely going to get it. Speaking from experience only from Northern Ireland's bureaucracy, there's no chance you'd get it. So you will be scored on whether or not you have applied or you have actually received your planning. And that comes down to the fact that it's a big risk to be giving out a grant to an organisation or to a club who haven't got planning in place and may not get it, and the money may not be drawn down, where maybe you have another one in the next county who's ready to go. So that's why they will always ask about the technical merits. Then you will also what funding you've received in the past. So you'll get scores with regards to what funding you have received. If you have received a high amount of funding, you'll get low points. If you haven't received much before, then you will get higher points on those. So those are the 6 things that you need to be aware of. Some of them you can influence by how you answer it. Other things are just given.
And Trish, just let me come in here. So the last time around, folks, if you look at those 6 criteria, the maximum score that was available was about 137 marks. To be in with a chance, so last time around, you could have been valid and you still might not have gotten money because you wouldn't have scored highly enough. So only the top 75% of applicants in every county are going to get funding. and the department will more than likely take that approach again going forward. You need to be scoring, if you're doing the capital application, you need to be scoring at least in the high 80s, if not 90s, to give yourself a proper chance. So what does that mean with 4 or 5 weeks to go? It is a case of, okay, if you need planning, you need to calculate, you need to have a look at these scores and kind of say, okay, is this something that's going to make a difference? Because with planning in particular, it could be anywhere between 10 to 15 points of a difference if you haven't got it or not. It is very, very big. The same with sharing. The only way you can score marks here for sharing is through executed license agreements of 15 years or more at the time of the application. Letters of support and stuff like that will help you in your 800 characters in the first criteria, but you won't score marks for sharing with letters of support. It has to be a license agreement of 15 years or more. And that's important when it is an application with a school and stuff like that as well. It is really crucial as part of that application.
Just a quick question there is, if it's a renovation of a floor, then do they need to show planning permission?
Yeah, so that's what we're going to show you. There's additional documentation needed as well if you don't need planning, which has to be included here as well. It's Appendix 2, which has to be signed by an architect to say that planning is not needed. You saying that you don't need planning isn't enough. It has to be signed off by someone, and the department has to be proven to the department to show that it's not needed. And there was a case where I did a session a few nights ago with a different group of clubs, and they missed out on funding because they didn't get that Appendix 2 signed by an architect or quantity surveyor or someone like that. So with all of this, as we'll show you in a minute, you're not actually doing a lot of work. People are signing forms for you, and with 4 or 5 weeks to go, you're relying on other people to do the work for you.
And you're more of a project manager pulling this together than actually, writing out these forms yourself. And it comes back to the likes of leasing or licensing or anything like that. It's not enough to say, yes, we have an agreement in place. It has to be proven. Okay, so if we come back to any applications, you need your quotation for your work, obviously. You need your proof of your own funding. So that can be a bank statement or a loan agreement. If it's a bank statement, it needs to be a snapshot showing the level of funding within 3 months of the application date. So that is a bank statement from November, December, January, which will show that you have the level of funding in that account at any one time over those 3 months for this application. You will also need, if you don't have title, you need to have Appendix 4 signed from the landowner to say that you have approval for doing this sort of work, okay? And the funding will go to them. If you have title, Appendix 5 needs to be signed, and that will show that you have title to that product, that ground or facility or building. If you require planning, you will require your quotation, your proof of funding. You will require Appendix 2 signed if you don't need the planning, to say this project does not need planning, or you will need to show the planning that you have. Okay, if you are doing this in partnership with a school, or should it be a parish hall or whatever it is, you need to show again your quotation, your proof of funding, your license agreement between your landowner, the school, the club, whoever you are. This is where you are sharing facilities. You need to show those license agreements, and we'll just show you an example. So, example of a quotation, you need to be very clear. I would always put together, when you ask for somebody for a quote, put that out. One of the questions we received before is, if you get a quote from Bob the Builder and he's going to do this work for you, does that mean you have to go to them when you're actually getting the work? No, not at all. This is just to show this is what the price is at the moment, okay? So should it be a sports specific company that does this type of work, or if it's actual building, fencing, lighting, drainage, whatever, flooring, there are specialist companies. I'm sure you all know them yourselves. So you need to get a quote from them and be very clear on what you're asking for. Also, just on a side thing, whatever be very clear what you're asking for, because when you might have to go back and renegotiate with the department on saying you didn't get the same amount, you want to have a good clear breakdown of what they're quoting for, so you can then point out, well, we want to go for ABC and not take D, things like that. Bank statement, it's coming back to the fact that You have to have your bank statement in the club's name. It cannot be in the name of anybody else. It can't be the name of the treasurer or a sister club or a parent club or anything like that. It has to be in the name of whoever is making this application. Okay, this is going back to what Darren has went through before, I'm sure, but it's your deprivation index. So whatever you are, then you've got the numbers. So don't quote me on what percentages I said previously. So if you have a Pubble index of 8, then you would need to get the full 12 points. You need to put in up to 30%. Whereas if you've got below 21, you would need to only put in about 15%. Now, if you only want to get the 1 point or 2 points, or, you can see that you can play with your points, or you just don't have that level of funding, then you'll know yourself what kind of points you can get and where, try and go as high as you can. Okay, here's the other document. So if you are going for a loan as your match funding, you need to get that filled out by your bank, or should it be a social enterprise loan from Clan Credo. So you need to have that from whatever financial institution, credit union, bank, whatever it is. So that needs to be fully filled in. We're coming back to with 5 weeks to go. If these things are needed, this needs to be acted upon straight away. Going back to what Darren has just said, to Appendix 2, when you don't need planning permission, this has to be filled out. This can be filled out by your planning department or by a technical supervisor, an architect, or a quantity surveyor. They can fill it out and sign that on your behalf. I had experience there recently of somebody who didn't get it because it was the wrong name was put in name of applicant. So just be careful. All the names are right. And these are the checklist you need to have at the end. All the names are the exact same on every single one of them for your club.
And remember as well that if you're part of a school application, it isn't, and the main applicant is either the religious order or the school or whoever it may be. It's the school's name that needs to be on the application, not your basketball club's name. So that's why it's in the name of the main applicant at all times.
So you'd be very, very clear who's making this application. If you don't have title or a license agreement, it's going to be the owner of that land is making the application. So they need to be the one registered in Oscar. They need to be the one whose name is on top of all of these documents. Okay, so it's just to be very clear at the outset of who is the one making this application for capital. If equipment's different. So if you have a license agreement, and this will be for shared facilities for over 15 years, you can see the elements of it there, and this is a legal agreement. Okay.
Just jumping in on that, we just did have a question there asking about the licensing agreement and whether they can be just signed off by a principal or board management, or do they have to be signed by solicitor? They have to be signed off by.
Typically is supposed to be legally binding license agreement, particularly for capital. From experience with doing these with schools over many years, it's very hard to do it just with the principal without getting the board of management and then there's solicitors drawn in. You have to remember as well that the school necessarily isn't the landowner, and if it is the likes of an Edmund Rice School Trust or the Christian Brothers or anyone like that, then they will draw in their solicitors too. With the license agreements as well, whoever the main applicant is with the license agreement, they have to give the new party at least a minimum of 20 hours of usage per week over the course and then over the full year. So if it is a license agreement with multiple parties, that 20 hours thing of usage can be cumulative. It can be 5 and 5 or 10 and 10 or some ratio of that as well, but there is a minimum hours of usage as well as part of that license agreement. That all has to be included then as well. And any kind of dispute resolution, if there is a commercial agreement as part of the license agreement of who's going to maintain the asset or what way it's going to be broken down between landowner and club, that all has to be within it as well, which is why a solicitor tends to get drawn in.
And just jumping on with a follow-up question, just I think you might have answered this in that, but if you're making the application for the higher amount, it's the landowner who has to put the application in. The club can't do it on their behalf.
Yeah, I see that one of the questions there. If you're putting in an application with the school and they own the land, they are the one that needs to register for Oscar and not the club, because they are the one making the application.
Yeah, well, sorry there, Trish. Everyone needs to be registered. All parties need to be registered. You will be listed as a joint applicant on the Oscar website as part of the application. You can't subsequently also make an equipment application by yourselves as well. So if you are included in and within a capital application jointly, you can't run off and do something yourself as well. So be aware of that.
Perfect. And then just going back to one of the things you touched on earlier, the Pubble Index, is it a website where people can check that out?
We'll send a link to that. That's the problem. Or even we'll do it here at the end of this presentation. We'll just pull it up, the website up. Perfect. Okay, so we'll share the screen and show you how to do it and all that there once we've just finished this, the PowerPoint. Is that okay?
Yeah, and just the last one there about a standard licensing agreement template, just to let people know on the Basketball Ireland website, under Get Involved Sports Capital, there is a template there that we got from the Sports Capital unit. So it's for I think a soccer club, so it might need to be amended, but it has the general outset of a licensing agreement on it.
And there's a question there about lockdown and should there be an extension. There is absolutely no indication that there will be an extension. Okay, so we should wait and see. If that happens, it will be announced, and I'm sure Basketball Ireland will let you all know, but there's been no indication that's going to happen.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, because we're all supposed to carry on as normal. Okay, so again, we come back to the title requirements. These will all have to be signed off by a solicitor or the Minister of Education who owns the land. This will come back to whether the school owns it or the Education Department and things like that. So you're going back to who owns the land. And I think Darren has went through that quite clearly. In terms of your application, you've got 800 characters. You should think of what to include. Like I said to you before, include the story of the club, exclude the story of, my apologies, 1 second, 1 minute. My apologies, home working. So you want to include who your club are, what the story of the club, what you intend to achieve, how this project will increase participation or improve performance of your members, attract new members, any community initiatives that you're involved with. There's not many characters, I know, but it's very, very important that you capture what you intend to do and why this project is so crucial to your club. Okay, and you're going back to why your club needs capital. It's not a case of you just want it, it's why you need it. So what capital? Go back down to what is your title? Appendices 1, 4 or 5. Do you share with clubs or schools? Get your licensing agreements in place. How much? Get your detailed costs of what you're actually requiring. Planning. Do you need planning? Yes or no? Which of the appendices do you need to sign off on? How do you fund it? So own funds, getting your bank statement in place where you would have that level of funding in your bank's account over the last 2 months or up to the next month. Okay. And you show that level of match funding. So if you need 30,000, you need to show a balance at some point in your bank statement of 30,000. Sorry, I'm going wrong way. Why do you deserve the funding? And that's going back to your 800 characters. So really, this is where you have to sell. This is where you do your pitch. And then you draft it. And then once you get somebody else to draft it, I would try and get somebody outside of the club, because sometimes you think, oh, that's self-explanatory. It's not. You need to look at this from a completely outsider's perspective, a completely cold look at your application. It's like a job application where they always say, don't expect us to know what you mean. You need to sell it and you need to let them know that this is what you're asking for. Proof it and then submit it. So we always say that your best practice is get a working group within your club, have up to 5 people, and they can be committee or others. So if you have partners, family members, friends who would have experience in project management, finance, writing, proofing, it's like, as I said to you there now, getting a fresh perspective on your application and seeing what gaps you have on telling your story and why you need this. Can you be ready for February 2021? We have 5 weeks and 2 days. So can you be ready for that stage? What is the goal for this project? What is the budget? And can you afford it? You know, will you be able to actually match the funding? Will you be able to achieve this? agree the milestones, who's doing what, and getting all these paperwork together, getting the different appendices filled out, getting the quotations, getting the bank statements, getting licensing, title, all of this. There's a lot of paperwork. As I said, it's like a project management role. And then you need to draft, proof, and submit your application. And from this, we'll go now to a few questions, if there's anything left.
Brilliant, thank you. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to write into the Q&A box and I will ask them directly. I suppose one that I had just talking to a couple of clubs and things like that around the licensing agreement with schools. So if you as a basketball club sign a licensing agreement with the school and the landowner, is there any protections that would stop that landowner, say, then deciding to go and put in an application for a soccer pitch that has nothing to do with the actual basketball club that they have a license with?
Well, that's why you want a legal document. It is not just an agreement in principle or anything like that, or a gentleman's agreement or anything like that. This is a legally binding document. So that if they receive the funding, this is what they are legally obliged to do to you as a club, and also the department, because the department has allocated them funding on that basis, not on the basis of doing it for another sport.
And officially, you can of course enter into an agreement on provision that the grant is allocated. That way, that if the grant is not allocated, that the license agreement isn't valid. There would be no, the GEA are very crafty at this, that they do a license agreement in that way, and then there will be a subsequent side agreement that doesn't make part of the official application. I'm neither saying anything here nor there in regards to that, but that can happen, say, for example, as well. The other bit that I'd kind of say would be that if the school is owned by the Department of Education, that Appendix 5A that Trish would have shown you earlier in regards to title, get that off this week. The Department of Education do tell you that you might be up to 3 or 4 weeks waiting for that form to come back, which when we have 4 or 5 weeks to go isn't ideal. And I know from last time around, because that form only came in last year, that we waited, that form was the one we waited until the very last day to try and get that in. Also on your 800 characters, it sounds easy, as Trish kind of said, but you need to be striking a few different chords. They give maybe about 6 marks for how it'll increase participation, improve performance. As Trish said, it's your club story, but bring it back to your members. Who are they? What's their gender? Where are they from? Is there a new Irish piece in play? Because that's one of the big things for basketball clubs as well. That's the kind of stuff you speak to. They will give other marks then to how the project will improve access for those with disabilities. There's about 4 or 5 marks there for that. And they will ask you then about your membership fee, and then as well about the level of facilities that are currently available in the area.
Perfect. Still waiting to see if we have any more questions. We must have answered quite a bit here.
Do you want to do the deprivation index just while there's any other questions might come up?
Yeah, I just actually I have one more just from talking to a few clubs as well. It's just a few of them on that are maybe looking at not applying this round, but getting ready for a large application in the future, and are looking at probably with the amount of work that would have to go into a large scale application with a school or a hall, a tiered approach over a number of years. So maybe just any advice for people like that, and what they should get ready before it even comes up again, and what advice you would give on that.
Yeah,
we have already had experience of this, of a number of clients who have decided not to go ahead for this February, and we are now working for the next round for that reason. And we're these clients are saying we'll take a year. We'll take a year to get this right and get it done properly, get the right title agreements, get the right licensing agreements. It's like you said there now about some different sports can have different ways of doing it, and they may not always be black and white. There's a few grey lines in there, and there could be a few things between the lines you didn't read and stuff. And when we're rushed with 5 weeks to get an application together, that's when things can get slipped in. So a lot of clubs are just taking the year to get ready for it for next year. So it's 2022.
And it it's a prudent approach, because when it comes to the own funding piece, It kind of whose bank account will we use? Will we use our clubs? Will we use the school's club? Will we use a joint account, which is okay too? But then negotiating who puts in what and how much can take a little bit of time as well. However, what I would remind you is that yes, you should start preparing next time for the application next time around and giving it as good of a go as you can. But remember that that money will go to the landowner, not necessarily to the basketball clubs. So between now and the next 4 or 5 weeks, there's no harm in putting in a small equipment grant because it won't hurt your chances next time around, because it will go to the school or the landowner, whoever they are. So don't let the round just go by. If there's little bits of equipment you can get that we covered in the last in the last session, then go for it now. You can get that kind of an application together very, very, very quickly.
And I would also say it gives you the experience of the process, because once you get approval, hopefully, that you would get a successful application, it's like a whole new round of negotiation that has to happen with the department. And there's a whole round of bureaucracy that you have to go through as well to draw down that funding. So it gives you a good insight into what is required to successfully be allocated funding and draw it down. So I would agree with Darren entirely. So do not be put off. The money is sitting there. If you do not apply for it, other sports clubs are lining up to apply for it. So why not get in that line?
Right. I think you might have just answered this one, Darren, was that if they get an equipment fund in this round, it won't be offset against a capital application next time, will it?
No, so who is the landowner? That's the main question. So if you apply for an equipment grant, that goes to you. However, if you're not the landowner and you're applying for capital, the money goes to the landowner, not you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. And then we have an application or just a question in here. So this club is hoping to do a joint venture for an outdoor court with a school, but they are delayed in confirming legal ownership because of CEAST. Yes. And now schools are closed, so can be delayed further. Could we prepare an equipment grant now in case? And if the legal document came back in time, we could go with the outdoor court and ignore the equipment.
We could go for both.
Yeah. Okay. The equipment piece, can go into the application with the school, say for example. You can't make two separate applications, but if you're going out getting equipment grants anyway, you can throw that into the ask with the rest of the capital stuff. And that the only difference will be that you'll be giving it to the school to upload it to Oscar, but if it was an equipment grant, you'd be doing it yourself.
Okay. So just there's new information for me, so I just want to make sure I have it right. So if the school is putting in an application for capital, you can put in an equipment application as well as the capital, as long as it's in the same application.
Yeah, so your club will be listed as a joint applicant, and we're putting in an application for capital and then some equipment as well, because to remind people of what we said, there was a reason to the stats we showed you earlier, because you're not going to get what you ask for. Yeah. And it's better when I'm doing capital applications, I always throw in a little bit of equipment at the end. Because I know that we're not going to get what we asked for. So if you're going in full hog for, say, 100K for the outdoor court, you're realistically only going to get about 60, 50 maybe as well. It depends on what part of the country you're based in. So I always, if you can afford to do it, always put in a little bit of extra equipment, because that's the one that's more likely to bite the bullet when they do the per capita allocation.
Well, that's brilliant. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure that. I thought that so what you couldn't do is if the school was putting in an application for capital and the club put in a separate application for equipment, that wouldn't be allowed. But you can put it in together.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's brilliant. I will wait and see if there's any more questions. If you want to maybe just show them the Pubble Index, that would be great.
I'll let Darren do it.
Or Darren, yeah.
I don't want him to have a night off.
Thanks. So yeah, it's very simple, guys. Go onto Google, type in Pubble Deprivation Index. You have the spelling there. It'll be maps.pubble.ie. So this will open up a little map of Ireland. So what you need to do then is type in your address. So for argument's sake, I'm going to throw in the National Basketball Arena, which is in Tala. So it comes up. You can also put in your error code, that will come up straight away as well. So you'll see here on the right hand side, you have a layer list. You look for public deprivation and then 2016 by a small area, and you'll see a load of different colors coming up. So the National Basketball Arena is here. So you click on this little area and we can see that it's in a public index area of minus 9.67. So it's regarded as marginally below average. And you can go back then into the form and see what kind of score they give for that, and you can start to chalk it off. That'll impact then the level of own funding that you need to put forward yourself, because if it is in a disadvantaged area, you don't need to put up as much money yourself compared to, say, someone in an affluent area. So for someone in an affluent area, for them to get full marks for own funding, they need to put forward about 35%. So what does that mean? So say, for example, if the total cost of the project is 100K, the amount of own funding you're putting forward yourself is about 36,000, and you're applying for a grant of about 64,000.
Okay.
And that does not mean, though, if you're successful and you receive 60,000, you don't have to match it. You still need to match that sort of pro rata. Okay, you still need to put your own funds to it, because I know we've had that question before. Well, if we get the 60 and that's what they would, do we still need to put our money towards it?
Perfect. A question on here is just wondering, would you know what the max an individual basketball club has received in the past and for what?
I would. I'd have to very quickly go back and check my database. There hasn't been a lot of big grants going in, or big successful grants going in from basketball clubs. Often it might be lost under a diocese or something like that, but we haven't seen too much evidence of large scale money, because you can see there by the totals that are coming in every year. Sometimes the basketball applications are within the multi-sport bracket as well, which is often, say, county council land or something like that. If the county council will be making the application on your behalf, but it's something I can check and send to Paul. I have a big long list going back 10 years of basketball applications. I'll be happy to check it for you.
Yes, brilliant. And Darren has sent me some resources and things that I will send out to everyone on this and everyone who's signed up. So that will be put out. And if any other clubs that you're talking to who might have missed these are looking for more resources, just get in contact with me at pcar@basketballireland.ie and I can send that out. Let me just see. I think I have another question on here. So for a national government body, I know this is John, how does that kind of figure in terms of applying for grants?
Yeah, the process works the exact same way. The thing we don't tell clubs is that there's two different pots. There's a local pot, which you would have seen there, which was the 52 million. But then there's a separate pot of money for regional applications, which is where the national governing bodies are, and all the regional bodies as well, or FEI clubs, anyone like that. It's the 300K valuation. It is a much, much smaller pot. It is a lot more competitive. And what I would be saying is that, if you're looking at your score, you'd want to be hitting 90, 100 on capital to give yourself a chance. It is difficult, but it's doable. It is doable. It's just a smaller amount of money and it's a bigger competition, but the process is the exact same.
Brilliant. I think that might be the last of the questions. So I just would let you have the opportunity to give any last words of wisdom for our clubs before they put their applications in.
Yeah, so I'll take this, Tricia, if you want. So I think what probably would have surprised you tonight is that there is a bit more of a mathematical approach to this than you might think. So it is about being a little bit savvy. So looking at the guidelines, looking at these last year's assessment and kind of saying, okay, where can I score high? Where can I score low? And how can I mitigate? If you do think that, we have a capital application and we're just not going to be ready for this time around, that's okay. But there is no harm in a small equipment grant, because one of the reasons that the GA clubs across the country and golf clubs across the country are getting so much money is because they're not all doing these 150K plus applications. They're still doing the small applications for equipment and stuff like that. So don't let that opportunity pass you by.
that's exactly what was shown in one of the previous slides. You know, you had over 1,000 successful applications of 50K or less. So there's huge scope there to get small equipment grants if you're not able to go for capital.
So
And don't be daunted by it. It's, you know, there's 6 questions, 6 scoring criteria there. It is a checklist of the documents that you require. Do not be daunted by it.
yeah, and if you look at when we showed you the stats earlier, and you would have seen, how did rowing and canoeing get 73% of what they asked for? Because they did small equipment applications, most of them across the country, and they're easier to do. The only difference that for an equipment grant, if you're going to do it between now and the next 5 weeks, is to get yourself a higher score, you're going to probably have to put more money up front yourselves to just up your mark. But you know, be aware of it, and you know, if you can do it, do it. That's what I kind of say.
Other clubs are waiting to, you know, get in line. So get there.
That's brilliant. So I just like to take this opportunity to thank 2 and 3 and thank yourself, Trish and Darren, for your help over this webinar and the last one. Just to let everyone know that the last webinar is already on our Basketball Ireland YouTube page, and this one has been recorded and will be put up on the YouTube page and our social media pages as well. If you're having any extra questions or anything like that there, you can contact me at pcar@basketballireland.ie, and I'll help as much as I can, and I can get in contact with Darren and Trish if needs be. I will send out the resource pack and anything like that there in probably tomorrow or by the end of the week, definitely. So just thanks everyone for tuning in today, and good luck with all your applications.